make it worth your while. My name is Lori Brownlee, and I am an itinerant teacher for English language learners with the Lambton-Kent District School Board. So I have been an itinerant teacher now full-time for about 6 years, and before that I was half-time ESL, half-time enrichment. So I've been doing this job for a number of years and have seen an awful lot of changes. We're now up to 2 elementary itinerant teachers plus 1 secondary, so we're growing leaps and bounds. We have about 750 English language learners across our board, which in some cases means 0, 1, or 2 students at a school, all the way up to one school that has 1/3 of its population as English language learners. So it's quite a diverse area. We also have probably our largest population of English language learners are Low German-speaking Mennonite students, but we do have students from over 50 different countries around the world and students who speak over 50 languages. So we have a wide variety, and that gives us a pretty good background from which to discuss. Sarnia, Lambton-Kent covers the 2 counties of Chatham-Kent and Sarnia-Lambton. So we're right in between the Windsor area and the London area. 2 great big counties. Our most rural areas might not have very many English language learners. Sarnia and Chatham have quite a few. So that's a little bit about me. And if I could maybe get Atala to come online and explain a little bit about herself. Atala?
Hi, thanks again for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Atala Andrades, and I'm the ELL teacher consultant for Granier District School Board, and my position covers K-12. I do have a great team of itinerant teachers that work with me on this on the elementary panel, but it's only me that supports the secondary panel. We also have a lot of similarities between Lori's board and mine. We are very large, cover a large geographic area, and one of our populations that it's pretty large in our board, it's also Low German Mennonites, and we also have a large population of FNMI students and many diverse students too from other cultures and backgrounds, and now we are also welcoming our newcomers from Syria. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you can walk away with a lot of new ideas for you to implement tomorrow.
Thanks, Atala. Okay, so what this is a collaboration between 5 school boards, and especially Christina, I know she's online. I would never be able to come up with all of the names of your school board, but very important areas. So we're looking in the Peterborough area, the Barrie area, Brantford area. Bluewater covers a huge district, and then ourselves in Lambton-Kent. So we're hoping after today that you'll be able to further your understanding of second language teaching strategies, and that you'll have lots of best practices that hopefully we can share, because as much as I like the microphone, I would be more than willing to share with anyone who has good suggestions and ideas as well. And I'm really hoping you'll walk away with some practical strategies and hopefully tons of resource ideas, because that's really what you need. So it's a good thing teachers are multitaskers, because I realized when I looked at this that this is an awful lot to ask from one particular slide. But in the text box, if you could sort of tell us a little bit about yourself, whatever you want to share, what your position is, your grade, or how many English language learners you're working with, first languages, whatever it is you want to share. And then if you came to the first webinar in this series, if you could give us a yes or a thumbs up, a happy face, whatever you want from that, whatever you called that little box up top, then that would be great, just so we know who we're working with.
So you want 2 things now. You want a thumbs up or a happy face if you've been here before, and you want people to put in the chat sort of where they are and what their roles are?
That's the multitasking.
Excellent. Can they use the microphone?
Oh, they can use whatever they want. I'm open.
Awesome. So you can feel free to grab the microphone and tell us as well, folks. I heard that little wow from Lori. I don't know if everybody heard that enough. I was thinking the same thing. This is great. Like what a cross section of people, and what a cross section of like experiences and things that are going to happen. I think it's really cool. I think everybody's got a lot to learn, you know, from each other as well as from you, Lori. So that's really cool.
I was just thinking how much they could help me.
That's one of the best things you'll find about doing webinars is you tend to learn almost more than you know, you give to people. That's what I've found anyway. So, but it's awesome. I think everybody's got lots to offer. So this is really cool.
That's wonderful. Well, it's so nice. I hope the people who weren't able to make the first session, the first webinar, I'm hoping that this will be like when you accidentally pick up the second book in a series and you read it and you love it so much that you have to run out and get the other book. I'm hoping that you'll want to log on to the archives and find the original session, because Christine and Christina did a lovely job. Okay, so it sounds like we have pretty much everybody from very early elementary all the way up to secondary. So hopefully everyone will find something that they can learn from today. Now, in the STEP assessment determines actually how you will help your student. So it helps you to understand the adaptations that you would have to make in order to support an English language learner at the same time that they're learning grade level curriculum. And this STEP initial assessment is actually really cool because it can be transferred right over to the ongoing assessment tool, which supports teachers in the classroom. It was covered really, really well by Christine and Christina in the first webinar. And so for those of you who were able to listen to that, they went through it piece by piece. So I'm not going to do that for the people who are joining us for the second time. But I do have to, there was just a few things that I wanted to touch on that leads to strategies. First of all, the STEP tool is the one and only tool that's being supported by the ministry. Well, they wouldn't do that unless it was really well thought out. So this tool has been developed after a lot of research. They've field tested it, they've revised it, they've field tested it again. And the people behind it are really the big shot names, if you will, behind ESL education in Ontario. So it's very well developed. It also connects with the Ontario curriculum, and it's divided into grade level groupings. So it's really quite user friendly. And you don't have to do anything extra. You can just use it with your regular schoolwork, which I really like. When we were initially shown this tool, the people using it all had these 3-pocket portfolios, and they had 1 pocket for each of the areas for oral, reading, and writing. And this just makes it so handy to have that portfolio to take to a school-based team meeting or at a parent conference or with older students to actually share the portfolio with them and show them what skills they'll be working on next. And I know in some boards, they've actually put the Continua online. And this is so handy, particularly if there's more than one teacher. And I know that there was at least one board in Ontario where they give the students reading rights to the STEP Continua so that they're able to see what they've been marked and also to say, you know, hey, I disagree with this or I agree with that, and to continue to know what they're working on. So it's actually very, very helpful. And it helps you to know which adaptations are needed in order to help with the curricula. And then that helps you to determine which strategies. It's very cyclical. And I know this resource was mentioned, but it's just one that I love. It's the Many Groups, Many Voices, and it's one of the first ones I think that the ministry put out when they revamped all their curriculum. And to me, it's just so user-friendly. It gives you nice welcoming strategies. It gives you nice adaptations. It's just a really nice, friendly, any teacher can read it. It's short, which I really like, and it's just really usable. So that is a good one that I wanted to bring up one more time. Now, we've done an awful lot of work in our board with student voice. Since our English language learners are currently living the experience of attending our schools, we ask them all the time to support us with their ideas for our professional development. So then we work to combine their ideas with what we've learned from the Ministry of Ed and other leaders in the area of ESL and ELD programming. So I will reference student voice a lot in this presentation because I figure that they're the ones who are able to tell us what we need to do in order to help them to be successful. So because I've worked so closely with these partners, I've realized that there are at least 3 recommendations that I would make in order to help you even to determine the best strategies to use with your students. So first of all, the best part of doing an initial assessment is that I get to hear the student's story. I get to connect with the child, even if it's only briefly. I would suggest that each and every teacher should find a time to sit one-on-one with any ELL, or even every student, just to start to make that connection. If they're brand new to English, you can work through a translation app. You can work with pictures, you can work with charades, whatever you need to do. But your focus isn't going to be on academics. Your focus is going to be on a conversation about the child. Maybe favorite animals, favorite colors, sports, food, family, anything that you might be able to start a rapport. And make sure to share a little bit about yourself too, because in a regular classroom, that connection happens gradually. But for an ELL, especially a newly arrived ELL, they've missed that introduction, and it's so important. It's so important to get to know the child, not just as an English language learner, but as a person. Secondly, as one of our student experts explained, teachers assume that we already know things. Pretty straightforward, but I think it's a really good idea to get as much background information as you can about educational history and any missing pieces. We had a couple of years ago, and this is a really extreme instance of this, a newcomer arrived at our school, a school in our board, a grade 7 student. But he spoke a variety of English, so I was never called in to do an initial assessment. He had fairly strong oral language skills, and his reading, it wasn't quite at grade level, but it was pretty decent. The difficulty was in his writing. His written samples looked like a collection of random letters followed by a real word, and on and on and on. So the school team decided that he must have a learning disability. But the learning resource teacher took the time to look through his OSR and realized that he'd fit under the English language learner umbrella, so they asked me to come on out and do an assessment. So they explained the background, so I did a little bit different of an assessment than I would normally do. But when we got to the written language, I asked him to tell me the sounds of the letters. And I said, what sound does B make? And he stared at me blankly. So I demonstrated B sounds like buh, buh. And he blinked at me for a minute, and then he said, do all the letters make sounds? So we stopped the assessment right there, and I taught him the actual letter sounds and the corresponding letters that go with them, and his writing improved considerably. There was no learning disability, just a missing skill. So it's really important to remember that other countries around the world don't have the same schooling systems that we do, and they haven't learned the same content that we've taught. So it's just really important. Now this one, every single newcomer can name the person who was nice to them when they started. You can ask a newcomer who came to Canada 20 years ago and they'll tell you the person who was first nice to them. Fitting in and making friends was one of the top challenges mentioned by our students. So I think it's really important to question, but also to observe and find out who your student feels the most comfortable working with. Because it isn't always the person that you think is the best fit. Like often people will pick the smart, quiet kid, which is a safe pick, but the more comfortable that your student feels, the more they'll be willing to take language risks. So sometimes your best hope is to watch them on the playground, watch them at recess, see who it is they play with, and there's always a reporter in every room where you could say, hey, who's a good friend for Ellie, and they'll usually tell you who they're able to go to. So that's my short lecture on exactly what you should do in order to determine strategies. Get to know your student, make sure that they're comfortable in their classroom, and find out what the missing pieces are in the background so that you can fill in those skills. Now, best strategies. I find the best ones work really well with a number of your students. And before I did the English language learner world, I had spent an awful lot of time in special education. And I always find that everyone has some area where they have a little bit of a learning disability, maybe not a recognized one, but there's always an area of difficulty. Not everyone can do everything well. So I really like the idea that a lot of these strategies combine different learning modalities, because even though they're an English language learner, it doesn't make them all visual learners. There's still some auditory, there's still some hands-on kinesthetic, and that's important to know too. And many of the strategies, you'll be able to give yourself a pat on the back and say, I am already doing this right in my classroom. They're already working, and I'm a hooray for me. And I think in general, it just allows for a more inclusive classroom with the big emphasis that we've had on equity and inclusion across our province. I think that's a big thing. I like that, Itala, very true. If you connect with the family, they can give you a large amount of information about their student, which is hugely helpful. Now, specifically, so this first section is going to be sort of welcoming strategies and initial strategies. And this first one should be so easy. Ask your student how to pronounce their name. So this, I mean, I haven't done an exact poll, but I would say probably about 95% of our English language learners are quite happy with how their name's being pronounced. But it is such a nightmare if a teacher starts off calling the student phonetically by the wrong name, and then the whole class joins in, and then you have to reteach everyone in the classroom. That's definitely a bit of a nightmare. We also have had, there's a number of families who have chosen to pick a Canadian name, which can be really good, except that we had one student this year, and the parents came and they said they wanted her called Carrie. But when she arrived at school, all of her information was written Cherry, C-H-E-R-R-Y. So we had to go to the family and say, do you really mean Carrie, or do you want Cherry, like the little red fruit? Well, they wanted the little red fruit, actually, as her name. So then I had to explain to the parents that C-H sounds like Ch, and the name's Cherry. So we had to teach the student and the family how to pronounce their name so that it would work from a Canadian point of view. We've also had a number of students lately, and I think this happens more with students who come in with limited paperwork. So some of our students who were originally on refugee status, they may not have the name that they had in their home country. So they may look at you blankly when you say their name at first, because their name was changed in order to come here, or else they may have a different spelling. This has come up several times. We'll always ask the student, or we'll have a couple of very well-meaning families, and I know Avis, this is one that actually came up in the family interview. The family suggested that the name was too difficult, so we should call the child by a family nickname, we'll say, a short form of her name. Well, every time the school called that child by that name, she just cringed. And this was a secondary student. I can't imagine how many high school students would allow their family nickname to be their chosen name at school. Probably not very many. So I always think it's best to ask the child and make sure that they're comfortable with what you're calling them. And then the seat the student where they can see. It isn't always at the front of the room. Wherever you're teaching, and you have to really be aware of that, almost nobody stands at the front of the room anymore. We're all moving around constantly and trying to make sure, you know, proximity control and all that. So wherever you spend most of your time, that's where you'd put definitely where you put the kids. And then the choose a peer buddy. Now this is, oh my goodness, especially little kids. They just love to make a pet out of the new English language learner. They want to do everything for them. In fact, I went into one kindergarten room a couple of years ago, and I was trying to talk to the little girl, and her peer buddy stood in front of her and said, "She doesn't speak Sarnia yet. She only speaks another language." So make sure you're picking someone who actually will allow the child to learn and not just to copy exactly what's going on. Now the school environment, I think this is when, Christina, could be wrong. I believe Sarnia does have a specific dialect, Colin, and I don't quite speak it because I'm actually from Chatham, but I have found there are differences, just saying. So school tour, I think this is a wonderful thing. I think it's really helpful to set the child up with their own little individual book that shows them the important places in the school and the things that they specifically need to know. Even better if you can do it in dual language. If they're older, now remember, there's not necessarily the need to do that if they don't have a written first language. It's a lot of extra work and maybe not necessary, but the pictures for sure are going to make a world of difference. I also think it's nice for the staff to go through and do a school tour and just to look around and do a little bit of an equity walk and make sure that there are at least some representations in the school of other cultures and maybe other languages. I think that's really helpful. That's true. Definitely good for the parents to be able to read the second language and also to know that it's represented. Okay, so I have a rich visual environment. This is important. Now, I like one of these word walls, and the other one I don't particularly like for English language learners. Anyone have any thoughts on these two word walls? There's no wrong answers. Definitely, Christina, the visuals sure help. I think if you're just putting the words up, it looks pretty. And for a lot of children in the class, it would probably be helpful. But the math word wall with the visuals, it just makes a world of difference, especially to your brand new students, because they're trying their best to develop any coping skills that they can. So that type of visual word combination is just super helpful. Yeah, the word wall on the right, it's a great start. It just needs a little bit more added to it. Definitely. And you could definitely make it a bilingual word wall. A lot of people have chosen to do that. Oh, I like that, Avis. The ELL could add the pictures, for sure, if they knew what the word was. Maybe that's where their peer buddy comes in to help. Okay. So another thing that I think is really helpful, the English alphabet. Our alphabet is not the same as every alphabet around the world. I think it's nice to put the alphabet strip on the desk, even for older students. I mean, you have to know your student for sure, and there's some who would be very embarrassed by that. but I think it's one less thing to worry about if they have it right there for them to have a look at. It's also really nice to have bilingual dictionaries if you're able to afford that in your board. Word cards, they can do their own personal dictionaries that cost very little. And Steph's just added a link for these are the bilingual dictionaries that we really like. They're nice because they're thematic, and it's really nice for writing. But there's many out there. Now this is a big one. There are so many English language learners who know the answers to what you're saying, but they don't have the words to be able to respond. There is absolutely no reason why they can't answer differently. So, and if you give them a hands-on activity, they can usually show you what it is that they know. Sometimes they can answer orally, even when they can't answer in a written way. Sometimes they use their first language. If they have a strong first language, then that's a wonderful way to do it. Sometimes they just draw pictures, and we've had charades. It must be maybe a big sport in our board because we definitely have that going on in some classrooms. But please allow them to answer in some way, because that's just so important for them, for their self-confidence and their self-esteem. They know the answers. Just give them a way to be able to answer it. And this, our dual language labels, I think it's just so important. I think it really helps to provide that valuable immersion experience, but with different cultures. Like, everyone can be immersed if everyone can read in some way on this. It's really important to have that first language, and for the kids to know that it's okay for them to use it. This is so important. A lot of them, when they come to Canada, their families will say, stop using your first language, we only learn English. Please don't let them do that, because the research is completely opposite. The stronger you are in your first language, the more quickly you will pick up a second language. So important to allow them to continue with their fluency in their home language. And that's something that should be shared with parents again and again. Now this is one that I have used the workbooks, Avis, more at the secondary level, really. We had an ESL classroom in Sarnia where we were able to do it, and I think they're really good. Do you like them as well? Oh, just ordering. I think it's worth it. It's definitely an age-specific one. Atala, are you just waiting and waiting to say something? Hop in there.
Yeah.
Atala?
Hi. Sorry, I just wanted to stress the importance of the use of first language in the classroom. I think as teachers, you know, it's very, very important for us to really stress how valuable that resource is to erase that stigma or that, you know, kind of labeling that it's not good to speak another language. I think if it comes from us, like from the teachers, from the school environment, that is so important and so valued that you speak more than one language, is just very, very important, I believe. Right? And just to, I guess, to erase that stigma, because a lot of our students, you know, feel ashamed of speaking another language or speaking with an accent. So I think it's something to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important point, Atala. I think language is such an important part of a person's identity that when you're not allowed to use your first language, it takes away a little bit from who you are as a person, at least from a self-concept point of view. So I do think it's important. Colin, did you want to say something too? Colin?
Sorry, no, that was me, but somebody else clicked
Okay.
on their mic, and I had to take 2 seconds to go and click it off. Otherwise, we would get a lot of feedback. Joel, if you were going to say something, I'm sorry. I'll give you your mic back in a second. I actually wanted to ask a question. just thinking about the importance of having kids continue on in their home language, what are some strategies for teachers to then sort of, I don't want to say allow that to happen, but like what do teachers do? Say you give an assignment and the kids are doing some writing, for example, but say they're doing writing in their own language. How do we as teachers then sort of embrace that and deal with that? I've never experienced that before, so I just have a legit question.
It's actually something a lot of teachers struggle with. Allowing kids to use the first language, especially with same language partners in the classroom. They always say, but I don't know what they're saying. But you can usually tell if a kid's off task by their body language and by the way they're watching you. So that for sure. But when they're writing, you can tell so much if you actually look at their written work. So when we do an assessment, we often do this. You have the student write in English an answer, and they're struggling away to write a couple of words or one sentence, and it takes like 5 minutes. You ask them to write in first language, and in about 2 minutes, they've written a whole paragraph or a page to tell you what they know. And then you look at it, and you can actually tell an awful lot just by looking at a sample and thinking about it. But then often, the student will have at least a little bit of English to be able to translate part of it for you. You definitely, Google Translate is a go-to for any ESL teacher. We all use it. If you can have them do it on an iPad or on a computer, there is an easy, you can get a slightly better translation. Often they'll draw pictures with it to try and help you to figure out what they're saying. So, yeah, it's actually, it sounds funny,
I bet it does. I'm sitting here
works
thinking about it as a teacher, and I go, oh my goodness, what a great learning experience for me to understand from someone else's point of view what it's like to not be able to communicate. Right? I think that's really cool. So thanks for that.
Well, it's skipping a little bit, but there was actually online a couple of years ago, I think. I read about a secondary teacher who was concerned that some of his English language learners weren't being chosen as partners whenever he gave work in his science classroom. So he started to offer bonus points if the report was handed in more than one language. Well, this was a really great idea, and all of a sudden the children who maybe weren't, who were seen as maybe a bit of a deficit because they didn't have enough English to do everything, were all of a sudden the benefit and would get them extra marks in order to put that second language. So there's nice ways to pair it in without it being too in your face, too upsetting to a teacher's idea of what you need. It can be very, very simple, and it took no extra work for that teacher. I really like that one. And that's the same for us. We need to learn at least a little bit of their first language. And I know if any of you out there are as much of a linguist as I am, I do terrible things with other. I don't even do very well with English some days. And sometimes when I'm trying other languages, it's just painful. But what it does, I still try. And the kids are like me. That was a nice try, Mrs. Brownlee. Try again, Mrs. Brownlee. So they are really good about understanding how hard it is for you to learn their language, and also for them to know that at least you're trying and understanding the struggle that they're going through. yeah, bonus marks, but that's how it was written. So I can't give the teacher any credit because it was too long ago, and my memory is, I can barely remember what I had for breakfast. But he at least had it. He had a good heart. He had a good idea there. Okay, now this is a huge thing. Teachers don't need a huge, or you don't need a huge amount of words to give instructions. You can make this very, very simple and with a little bit of visuals. This is just a great sample here. To be able to show exactly, don't do a whole lot of words that aren't necessary. Just do the pictures, and here's what you do, and here's where you find the resources. Just make it as simple as possible. Dual language books. Here's another way to bring the first language into your classroom. If you can't afford to buy a number of books, and I know if your budget is $0 like ours is. What you can do is you go to the public library in your area, in any area, and you beg them to buy or borrow books for you, and some of them will have fairly good collections of all different kinds of languages. Bring them into your classroom, allow the other kids to look at them too. I love inviting parents in to come and read a book in another language to the class. And again, you have to know your student, definitely. Some of them would rather crawl under a rock than have their parent come into the room. But especially younger children love it when their parents come in, and you can still tell a lot about a story even if you're hearing it in another language. I've also seen a couple of teachers pick very short books off YouTube in other languages and have the children listen the whole class and see how much they can actually understand of what's going on. You can even do it with French books, just to show that with another language you can still get a lot of what you need, even without knowing the exact content. I think so, Avis. I think the parents actually enjoy the invitation. I think they're looking for opportunities to be included, and so it's up to us to find it and help them to get in the door. Now this is one I can't find on anybody's list, and I can't believe it. So it's my own list. Board games. What a great way to teach conversation, questioning skills. It is true, there's a ton of different videos on different languages. Even really small children can play Go Fish and learn the rules very quickly. And you can have Go Fish with number cards, you can have Go Fish with alphabet cards, you can have Go Fish with animal cards. It's a nice way to learn some basic rules. And for older children, you could pick higher level games without a lot of language and just help them to develop some relationships. Kids love to stay in at recess and play a board game with another kid. I can't tell you the excitement that that draws. And all of a sudden you're helping in a whole bunch of areas. So there's so many games out there. I see my able-bodied ringer here, Steph Wood, is helping. There's so many good games. Apples to Apples is a great one, the one with pictures. That's just so much fun, and the kids laugh so much. Bingo's good for your whole class, of course. That's an easy one that a lot of teachers use. There's just so many, and it's not expensive. You can get them at garage sales. Okay, now this is a dicey issue, a really dicey issue. We have so many of the kids have said either they really want people to talk slower so they can understand them, and it's almost 50-50, and the rest of them, of our student experts, feel that they don't want people to talk slow because it makes them feel like they're not smart enough to figure it out. So here is another one where you really have to know your student. I can't talk as quickly as I am right now, although that's hard for me. But definitely simplify your vocabulary. And just to the point, instead of saying 2 sentences when you only really have 2 words that are important, make it really direct and pair it if you can. It's just really helpful at the beginning. But don't slow it down to the point where I've lost interest or that student has. There's definitely a fine line here. Yeah, you're right, Harmony, exactly. Don't raise the volume of your voice. Yeah, we don't have to yell at them. They're still not going to understand us no matter how loudly we say it. Okay. Now, as they start to get a little bit more language, this is a big one, the word of the day. The word of the day is another one where you need to know your student. We had a student who came up from Brazil a couple years ago. He was only a senior kindergarten student, and he was okay for the first couple weeks, and then he didn't even want to come to school. So when we talked with the parent, what he said was he was afraid of losing his Portuguese. So I suggested to the teacher and the parent that we start with word of the day, but that the student, Samuel by name, could actually teach us the word himself. So he would go home every night and he'd pick his word and he'd talk to his mother, and then he'd come in and they would show it on the smartboard and he would teach his word, and that little bit of control made him so happy that he was willing to come to school. We had another classroom where there were two very young, I think they were in grade 2, low German speakers, and the low German speakers, they have a bit of a rougher time at times with reading and writing, because this isn't necessarily the background that they come from. Not all of them, but these two young men particularly struggled, and the class was old enough to know it. So I suggested to the teacher that she let the kids do a word of the day, the two of them. So the two of them, they would practice all the way on the bus home, going through the exact words that they wanted. They would come in and they would do that, and the whole class loved it so much that they actually started a German word wall. So they had a picture of the word, the German word, the English word, like they really got into it. And the teacher one day said to me, "I don't know, I think I might have a problem." And I said, "What's the problem?" And she said, "The other kids are starting to use German words in their writing. Do you think that's a problem?" So I thought about it, and I said, "Well, has anyone complained?" She said, "No," and I'm like, "Well then, they're learning another language. I think it's all good." So word of the day is a wonderful thing, and sometimes you have a really quiet student who just would prefer not to. Sometimes the teacher can do it, sometimes someone else in the building, and sometimes you just don't want to do it at all. But for the most part, I think it's a lovely thing, and people can bring in words from their own culture, which is really important. There are so many nice ways that the kids can continue to read about things in their first language. I really like this, and we've talked about this several times, but it doesn't have to be right at the beginning where they're allowed to continue in their first language. That can go on for a very long time if the kids need it and want it. Now this we found again and again, the kids continue to tell us the hardest thing is coming up and talking in front of the class or answering orally. So please give them a little bit of extra time to respond. And we've had kids, like level 4 kids in grade 7 and 8 who are Canadian born, so they've had quite a bit of experience. And they'll say, someone will ask a question, and they'll be sitting there trying to figure out what the question means and translating it in their head and translating it back. And by the time they figured out the answer, everyone else has moved on to the next question, and they're like, "Oh no, it's already too late." So maybe even a chance to allow them a book, an answer book that they could write in themselves, so that they don't have to talk in front of everybody. It's just a nice piece. And there might be other kids who will fit that need too. Believe it or not, I was a shy child. I would have preferred this myself. I really think it's important to give a lot of hands-on activities. I think that makes a world of difference. And I've got a picture in here of Jim too, because Jim is often the one that people think they'll know how to do it, but games and activities are different from country to country, and they don't necessarily know the rules. And everyone thinks, oh, they'll just join in and everything will be great because it's hands-on. But that's one that you really need to think about. Kids have brought that up again and again, that they didn't know what to do in gym and they felt really awkward. There's also countries where the girls and the boys are quite separate. In the classrooms, especially our low German Mennonite students who went to school in Mexico, they have very separate. The boys were on one side of the classroom and the girls were on the other side of the classroom, and they weren't allowed to interact. And all of a sudden you get to gym and you have kids and definitely newcomers from other places around the world. This is a pretty intense issue. And then you get to gym and everyone's playing together and touching each other and tagging each other, and there's a lot of work there that you need to think on before you allow them to just run willy-nilly into the bowels of the gym. Is there a question? Somebody? Harmony, are you asking a question? Nope, sorry. You just got so excited that you started pushing buttons. I like that. Good. Okay, think, pair, share. I think this is beautiful. This is a nice way to allow that extra little bit of time for the kids to think. And I like it even better. Is there such a thing as think, write, pair, share? I'm sure there is, because teachers think of all of those different options. But I think it's really important for the kid to commit, and they can't. Often what will happen is when they get with another student, they'll change their ideas. So really good idea to have them think, have them write or draw an answer before they share it with someone else. I think that's a really nice thing. but to share with just one person, hopefully the one person who they feel really comfortable with, I think that's just a wonderful way. And it's probably something you're already doing in your Avis peer care share. I like this idea. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Just made it up. Ah, my kind of person, Avis. This is why we're getting along. Okay, the idioms. We have, and I don't know, how long are you considered a newcomer? Some of our settlement workers have been here like 20 years and they still call themselves newcomers, so I'll say newcomers. They always say the worst thing for them are the idioms. Those poor ladies. Oh yeah, Atala. I'm singing to the choir because I have to tell you, they're awful. They're awful for the poor little kids. They're picturing cats and dogs falling out of the sky. One told me they would catch themselves a dog because it would just be a wonderful thing. They were waiting for it. They kept looking out the window whenever it rained, hoping that the cat and the dog would fall from the sky. We've had so many kids having difficulty with the idioms. So please try not to use them. If you're going to use them, try and explain it explicitly to actually show what you're talking about. And you don't even know how many you use until you start working with English language learners and going, oh, sorry, because they're very literal. It's like working with kindergarten, very literal. Yeah, I like that, and there are so many cool idioms from other languages. It is a really nice sharing piece if they can do it. Also, with younger kids, I like them to do like an idiom book, like Raining Cats and Dogs looks like an Amelia Bedelia kind of thing. But Raining Cats and Dogs really means a picture book that they could share with younger students. That's actually a really good idea. Okay, the graphic organizers. You probably all use them. So there's another check mark and a pat on the back, and they're awesome. They work really, really well. You can tell what a student knows and what a student still needs very well by how they fill in their T-chart or their Venn diagram. There's so many different options, and for reading and writing, read story retell, there's so many ways you can use these, and it's just a really nice piece to see how much information they're getting. And again, you can do these in first language. There's no saying it has to be in English. You can do them with pictures. There's no rules in my world, which is why I have this job. I think it's so important for kids to have a basis. Giving them some sentence starters, giving them some closed passages. It's old school, but it works. I mean, there's a reason for it. The vocabulary lists, I really like them to be in more than one language. I think that's super helpful. Often, you'll see some stories written by kids, and they have all their sentence starters, and then they'll switch over to first language. Or it's actually really, really nice to be able to see what all they can do. I like that too. I like them to start with first language. I think it makes sense when they get to the editing process or whatever. Once you've moved along, if they want to move to English, that's fine, but it's really nice to be able to get your thoughts down in your first language. Okay. So this is where Steph's going to be putting in some links for you, and these are very specific. This is the picture dictionary that we really enjoy. We use this a lot. I love, love, love the big idea books. They're just wonderful. They cover science and social studies grades, help me, 3 to 9? That many. So that's really good. They're great, and the infographics in them are phenomenal. And I would say, if I was a special education teacher, hint, hint, I would so use these with the rest of my class because I think they're really well suited. And I think that most of the kids in the class would actually benefit because I think they would understand a lot of it even better as a starting point, and then maybe moving on more in depth for the other ones. But they're wonderful. And I don't get paid for that. I didn't have anything to do with it. I'm getting no money at all for giving that rave review. That's right, and you can use them for older kids. They don't look babyish at all. They're really good. And then I like the National Geographic ones because they're real pictures. First of all, anything that's cartoony, it's hard for the kids to for sure know what you're talking about. And people are always looking for books for older kids that don't look too young. So this is something no one would have to be embarrassed about having. Now, actually, in about 3 slides, I'm going to be asking you all for your book resources too, so if you want to start thinking about them now. I like the Britannica, and I like those because they're free, which is also really cool. Avis, thank you. The guided reading, there's nothing more helpful. Kids have said that again and again. This is the one thing that they've all agreed helped them learn to read. Guided reading is so important. I think, does almost everyone have the Fontes and Pinnell? And the main guided reading? You'll have some kind of level reading literature in your schools, for sure. We personally use the leveled literacy intervention kits as well. And they're awesome, but they're also very, very expensive. So if you're looking into those, keep that in mind. But they're really well done. I know Atala's board has also jumped onto that resource, which we originally got from Windsor. So networking, it's so important. Now the high interest, low Davis, if I could, I would. The high interest, low vocab books. I used to use them a lot with the special ed kids I worked with, but I find they're actually really good. The only thing is they often have phrases that are very idiomatic, I find, but there's so many good ones that you can find. Usually you just have to look high interest, low vocab. There's usually a ton of them, and they work really well. The graphic novels also work very well with older students. Not embarrassing to read, usually entertaining. And then, of course, there's the online books, and there are so many of those. We picked some of our favorites here. So Steph is typing rapidly over here. You would be very impressed if you saw her. Pebble Go is a great one. It's a really good one, and it has a lot of nonfiction. And if you're looking for older students, try and stick with nonfiction. But even if you're looking for younger students, the nonfiction works well because it's usually real pictures. And they can listen to them and know how it sounds. All really, really good ones. Epic, I don't know that one. Oh, Steph's heard of that one, but I don't know that one. I'll have to look that up. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is your chance. As many as you have, I'll give you a few minutes here. Colin, I don't know, can we give them 2 minutes maybe?
Yeah,
on a timer?
Of course. Yeah, you want a 2-minute timer?
A 2-minute timer to have a look if you want to have a chance to write in some links or just some suggestions for leveled or adapted books. I'd love that. This is my learning time too, so this will be wonderful. Print, online resources, we're open to anything that people in the province could use. True stories. Christina, do you know who writes the true stories?
All right, timer started.
Give me a minute. Sorry, Christina. You can have 2. That'll wake you up. Now, I love Avis's suggestion. Is there anybody who feels passionate enough about their resource selection to hop on the microphone and take a chance telling us what's new and cool about their suggestion?
I can talk to you about Remix.
Okay.
Remix is it's a series of really current topics, and it's tailored for probably students maybe grade 6 or 7 up to grade 12. And the same topic is shown in different level readings. So let's say we are talking about I don't know, pollution, or one of the books talks about Steve Jobs and all the new technologies that we have. And so the same topic, but it's written in 3 different levels, like for your beginners, intermediates, and advanced. So all of the students can be working on the same topic, but reading at their level. And it's very like grown-up looking, so it's not babyish at all. It's from Pearson, and it's very affordable. And it comes with about 20 different titles and a teacher guide for less than $300.
Wonderful. That's very affordable. Love that. Steph, could you tell us a little bit about Headsprout?
Hi, so I have a subscription for Headsprout. That's okay. Sorry, I'm having trouble because I'm sitting right beside Lori. So what it is an early reading strategies program. It starts with letter sounds and blends, and it actually adapts to what the kids do in each session. So if they aren't learning the specific skill that lesson is teaching, it will go back and reteach, which is really kind of interesting. The big problem for us is that it runs only on a laptop or a desktop, so students aren't able to use an iPad in order to access it, and we have less and less desktops and more iPads. The nice thing about it is it does all the early reading strategies, sounds, blends, meaning, and then it goes into a reading comprehension section where they work on basic questions, inferencing, all of those higher level reading skills once they have the ability to actually decode text. I also have a Reading A to Z subscription that I use for guided reading for some of my older students because they have a huge selection of nonfiction and fiction texts at a variety of levels, which is really nice. So I can tailor that to what the kids need and also what they're doing in the classroom so that I can support their learning there as well. Jenny, could you share with us about bookworms?
Can everybody hear me? So bookworms, basically, it's books that are for more or less your older level students. There's no, some of them are cartoons, so some of them are like graphic novels. Others are your more classic stories, and they've been adapted to various levels. So starting with starter level, which I use for my level A students, and then for my level B, C students, they're moving into level 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it goes as high as level 5. Basically, I keep a kind of a ELL library in my classroom, and during our independent reading time, students will grab these books and be able to guide themselves independently through them. They also have activities in the back of the books that they can do for reading comprehension and vocabulary development. And then the students also can be assessed as to their level based on online resources that you can find through Oxford Bookworms, and I believe it's on the website. So you can actually take your students through the initial assessment to figure out where they're starting. If you have any questions about that, hope that helps.
Sorry about that. We've had a little bit of technical difficulties. When Steph started talking, I got knocked out. So not literally, happily. So I'll just try and continue here on Steph's computer. You can't turn slides. Colin? I can't turn the slides, though, so that's going to be a little bit difficult.
Give me a second. I'm going to turn Steph into a moderator, too. All right. Try now.
Okay. Should be right up there.
Oh, I can change them?
Yep. Okay. Ongoing teaching strategy. And I see that we're down to only 15 minutes left, so I'm not sure. I'll try and get there. That activating prior learning, this is so important to make sure, first of all, that they do have the prior learning that's necessary, but also to be able to give them a connection to start with. That's important, I think, for all students. But if they don't have it, build that background information, because that's what they're going to need. That's the step that was missing, or, well, when I use the word step, I'm using it not as a ministry term, but that's the piece that's missing for a lot of them, so make sure that they do have it. And then if you can give them a framework for a lesson, I know this is a little bit of work, especially if you're a last-minute planner, but just a little bit of a list, just a little bit of a heads up of what's going on. I think it's hugely helpful, especially for older students. Now this is really important. There's a silent period that happens, and it's a natural, normal piece of what happens for kids. Sometimes it's very quick, and sometimes it goes on for a long period of time. And as, especially, I think parents, we try and push it a little bit, waiting for them to respond, waiting for them to answer, and a child can actually shut right down. We've had an extreme instance where a child wouldn't talk for 3 years, and then when he was ready, he started talking. So all you can do is make your student as comfortable as possible, and then you allow them to answer when they're ready. It can be really, really, really hard for a kid to talk in front of people. Sometimes they'll whisper talk into the teacher's ear. It's just really important to allow them to take the time that they need. Poor Steph's trying to type in forward, and now this is the one actually I do need her to type, because I think it's important to pre-teach that vocabulary. I think it's hugely important. I think it's important for a lot of the kids. And right now the current trend for infographics, and pretty much any book you buy has a ton of them in it. I think that's a great thing, but there's so many free sites for resources that you can build your own infographics. Just hugely helpful. Pop one of those up on the wall and you've helped a number of children, and then particularly your English language learner. Recycling new words. Now, I've read some studies that have said it only takes you 5 times to learn a new word. I doubt that. It would take me a lot longer. Maybe I'm a slow learner, which could be, but I've heard other studies that indicated it's got to be at least 15 to 20 times of using a new word before you make it your own and put it into memory. This is where that picture dictionary can be really helpful. This is also a great thing if you're doing your word of the day or your word walls. I've seen lots of teachers do hangman with their word wall lists, and that's something that you could easily do with basic conversational words, but you could also do it with 27 times even. Boy, maybe I'm ahead of the curve. But there's lots of neat games you can play. Pictionary, Outburst, especially like if you're looking at science words, if you're looking at a chemistry class, or if you are looking at Shakespearean English or something like that, most of the class is going to be an English language learner in that case. So take those words and actually do some wonderful games with them. I think it's really valuable. Quite. And then of course technology, and this is going to be, I think Christina's session number 5. So our very final session will be all about technology. So set your calendars now because you'll want to come back for that. Christina, if you happen to have a date, pop it into the text box because I don't have that up right now. But it is really important and growing more and more important. But having even just a little bit of Google Translate, a little bit of Speak and Translate, it does help. It definitely helps. And if you do whole paragraphs, you're more likely to get a misinterpreted message of what you really want. So it might be better to keep it as simple as possible, but very doable, and doable for the kids too, which is really nice. I'm trying to go through these fast to try and get them in. I'm really watching that clock. So teaching learning strategies, they don't always know them. Our texts could be set up differently. Our information, the way that our books are written, it's all very different. So showing them those things that our kids have learned, over the years as they've been here, just briefly even, how to figure out the main idea of a paragraph, how to highlight the keywords. That's something that they might not know. They might come in with that skill, but they might not. I think it's really helpful to have that there if the kids need it. And the visual supports, I had pictures up all over my room, and I didn't just teach English language learners. I just think it's hugely helpful. I think a lot of people have a very good visual memory, and you know that as soon as you combine it with some other modalities, the chances of it committing to memory are much greater. So just a really nice way of doing things, and that's an ongoing technique, not just at the very beginning, but ongoing. We have students who, were you writing Syria? As an ELL many years ago, I can still remember a period of time when I understood everything people were saying, but it didn't mean, it's so true. The kids will say that they could definitely know what people are saying, but the actual chance to respond was just so hard for a lot of them. You're exactly right. Oh, now this is also one that you really, okay, this can work beautifully. You can partner someone with the same language speaker, and it can be lovely. It can be really lovely. Now I'm going to give you one instance where it wasn't lovely. We actually had a student come from China, a Mandarin speaker, to a school out in a county school, and the odds are against us, but there was one other Mandarin speaker in the class. So we kept pairing those kids together, and the newly arrived student really started to rely very, very heavily on the student in the classroom, to the point where one day he put up a little sign, and in Mandarin and English it said "on strike." He was not willing to help her anymore. He wanted us to know it. And so even though this can work out really well, don't just rely on that same language speaker, because it's just not fair. It's not fair to them unless they choose to do it. Make sure you're switching it. Plus, there's always the day when they're away, and then your newcomer's has no one to rely on. Switch them up a little bit. Oh, that's happening for you, Ayatollah. It's hard. It's hard because the kids really, they're so excited that someone's speaking their language, but it really is a lot to ask, especially from a little one, and even up to grade 7 in high school. I think it is a lot to ask. Shared reading. Now this is one that's really important, because the kids can actually learn how a story sounds and how a story is read, and they're better able to understand what's going on, and they're better able to read for themselves. Of course, you can use any book you want, but we also we found a couple of good shared reading sites on the computer that Steph is working away here that you can certainly try, and I think it helps. I also think it's a really good one. A couple of kids have said to me, the hardest thing is when a teacher reads a story. So I think it's really nice to allow the student to have a copy of the book as well, because I think then they can go back and catch a few words maybe that they've missed, or maybe they have a better chance to look at the pictures and get the clues that they need, depending. But even as a high school experience, I would definitely allow each of them to have their own book if that's possible. Okay, Christina is just logging. Poor Christina. I'm with you on the tech problems. Yeah, May 3rd is the technology session, and Christina is the expert. If I was running that one, it would be a very short session. So I'm really, really happy that Christina is going to be running that for us. I'm looking forward to it. Now, the repeating instructions, this is one you'll have, I always say that they're almost dangerous, because the kids will understand enough that they think they know what you're saying, but not quite enough to fully, and sometimes they'll get lucky. Like they'll be like, oh, I got that, and they really do have it because they've picked up on the few words that they really needed. And sometimes they're so far off task that it's almost embarrassing for them. We had one student, a high school chemistry student, he all the students were given an element to do a research paper on. He was given the element of nickel. So the teacher said, "Do you know what nickel is?" And he said, "Yes, I do." He was very excited. And I know every single one of you is thinking right now exactly what he did. He went home and he did an entire paper on the Canadian coin, the nickel. She thought he had it. He thought he had it. But maybe just a few more questions would have made sure that he didn't make the mistake that we all knew he was headed to as soon as we started talking about it. Now the writing comes last, over and over again. It's just like with your own, if any of you with children, they learn to talk, then they learn to read, then they learn to write. It doesn't happen every single time, but it happens very, very often that way. That's the natural progression. So that writing, that's going to be the thing that they're going to need help with for a very, very long time. And just continue to scaffold for them. That's the main thing. Keep scaffolding, allowing them to build the confidence and the skills that they need. It's coming up. Oh. Steph's writing in there that they need writing conferences, which is true. It is true. I was thinking, this is my slide for that. She's ahead of me. But yeah, they definitely need to, the guided questioning that you can have, that you do in a conference, in a writing conference, is so helpful. And they will need additional time to write. And still, writing in that first language, there's no problem with that. But I think give them a sample, let them know exactly what's expected of them. And I think that's hugely helpful because sometimes they're not quite certain exactly what it is. I'm trying to keep us on track, Colin. And then when it's time for corrections, choose one at a time. Please don't circle the whole paper. There would be nothing more disheartening than having your whole paper corrected. And remember, they're going to write the way they talk. That's what people do, and that's particularly what children do. So the mistakes they make orally will be the mistakes they'll make in writing. So don't use red pen. Please, do people still do that? I hope they don't do that. For anybody, don't use the red pen. Personal opinion. I should throw that in there. Anyway, it's just really important just to pick one or two things at a time, work on that, let them practice it, and then allow it to happen naturally. Same for oral, actually. And then, of course, there's tons of, and we've gone over some of these that would work really well for reading and for writing. But you definitely want to be able to support them as much as you can with the technology that we have. We have it, we might as well use it. I'm really trying here. I'm not going to get to the end. Okay. You know what I'll do? I'll give you the links for these. I'll go slowly through the slides just so you have them, and then we can wrap up. But I'm afraid I won't give you time to actually go to search them. But oh, I just sounded like my daughter. She is always searching stuff up. I'm like, that is not correct. Anyway, the initial step guide, step guide for users from the ministry has an awesome chart. It's actually really well done, and there was no note of surprise in my voice. Of course, it was well done by the ministry. Page 27 and 28, it will give you really good strategies and suggestions for children at all levels. And this is one from Avis, so shout out to Blue Water for this one. This one is fabulous, but it's also really extensive. So this one has seriously 101 pages to it because it's an epic volume of immense proportion is how I think of it. But I have to say that if you look at nothing else with it, page 22 has a strategies go-to matrix, and it's really phenomenal. Now, it's written in American, so that means that they have 5 levels of language learners, but you know, you can crack that American code, no problem. We have 6, but it's pretty close, definitely. But page 22 is awesome. You have to keep going, Steph. I'm really trying. I'm booting through. The one from Alberta I liked because it is so straightforward. This woman is she's not beating around the bush in any way, straight to the point, and she wanted to point out the focus on cultural and social and political backgrounds of kids, even from the same countries. Very important. And Colorado, I always love those resources. They have a wonderful links for great ideas, and it really points out the idea of looking at the relationship between the first language and English and how much that will help you to find your strategies. And last but not least, there's Atala and I'm out of breath. If you need to contact either one of us, you're more than welcome to. There's our email addresses. And thank you so much. Colin?
Yes? Yes, you did. You're right true. And just so people know, I've been madly sort of copying and pasting into a document. All of these resources and links will be put on the OTF website, and I'm assuming that you guys will get an email with that at some point, or you'll be able to go and look it up yourself. So I've done my best in trying to everything that was shared. There was a ton of stuff shared. Oh my goodness. I've put them all in a document, and they will be put up on the OTF website in the next little while. So if you've missed something, don't feel bad. We'll get it all there. But that was great. If anybody has any questions, I see lots of people saying, thank you so much. I think I'm the voice for everybody there because it was really cool. I mean, I learned a lot of stuff I hadn't thought about and stuff I'm not thinking about. So, we've got a couple of new, like I said earlier, I'm secondary, but we've got a couple of newcomers that have come from Syria in our community, and actually my daughter has one in her grade 6 class as well. So just some interesting things that I'm going to take away from it. So I thank you for what I've learned today.
You're very welcome. I'm hopeful that there's things there that you could use tomorrow. I think a lot of people will really feel better about their teaching.
Awesome. It's good stuff.
And I'd like to jump in here too to say thank you so much. You've done a fabulous job, Lori and Atala. This is such a valuable program, and I can't believe the strategies and that you're sharing and the resources. I came to Canada in 1957. Wow, we've come a long way. So thank you.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you very much, everyone. And please don't hesitate if you have questions. My email is a good way to reach me. I'm on it way too much.
Thank you so much, Lori. You keep giving me a lot of credit, but it was all you. I was just here for support, but thank you. It was an awesome presentation, and you always made me laugh.
If you can't laugh, you've lost your love of life. I can't have that.
All right, everybody. Well, I'm guessing that there's more of these to come, so sign up for the next ones, and you'll keep going. I guess we're finished for this evening. You guys can log yourselves out just by clicking the X if you're on a Windows machine, or the little red dot if you're on a Mac, or file exit or whatever you need to do. And I'll have to stay on a little bit here, and I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you for that reminder.